At The Defender, we're building great leaders one leader at a time. And on your path to becoming a great leader, it's often important to reflect upon the things to avoid while setting yourself the right foundation to ensure that you're continuously learning, challenging yourself to be the great leader that you know you can become. In this episode, we're going to analyze the effect of the departure of ex-CEO of Cleo, Shannon Spanhake. I'm Gregory Wade. You're watching The Defender. For those of you who aren't familiar with Shannon Spanhake, she's the ex-CEO of a company by the name of Cleo, and she was recently dropped by the board because of her toxicity as a leader, and quite frankly, because she lied about her age and she lied about her educational background on her attempt and her surge to be able to achieve a $1 billion valuation for the company. In fact, it's a really sad story, but there's a lot that we can learn from this situation. I have to admit, when I first heard about Shannon's story, I actually felt a little sorry for her. But as I quickly delved into more details behind the situation, it was very, very clear that we were actually dealing with a situation where we had a toxic leader who was actually demanding that her team work between 80 to 90 hours a week in order to help establish and reach this $1 billion valuation that she wanted to be able to accomplish. And on the path of lying about her age and lying about her educational background, it also became clear that she was really only after the valuation and wanted to be seen from a market perspective as a fast-moving, young, energetic startup CEO, and kind of put all of the other foundational stuff and the really important stuff from a leadership perspective on the back burner. In retrospect and in review, Spanhake was able to identify that the root of her issues and the cause of how she behaved in a toxic fashion with her organization related in many ways to her insecurity. Of course, this really does challenge you to say, well, why wouldn't you behave in a different way when you were trying to drive for that $1 billion valuation, as opposed to realizing in retrospective that you were actually failing and that you were erring in your leadership style. What this ultimately gets down to is a lack of self-awareness. And it's important in understanding that self-awareness is a critical part of establishing yourself as a leader who listens, who absorbs, and then makes decisions in a meaningful and supportive fashion. Now, we aren't all perfect. We know that. We know that we err, we know that we have faults. And for people at the top, often it's difficult because we know that old adage, right? It's lonely at the top. But the fact of the matter is that folks like Shannon Spanhake and other leaders who have insecurities actually have a whole bunch of tools and assets at their disposal that allow them to be able to challenge themselves in that environment while they're trying to achieve that $1 billion valuation. So an individual such as Shannon Spanhake, ex-CEO, had access to coaches, had access to resources, whether they were online resources, whether they were in-person training, and ultimately, big question, where the heck was the board at the time? Many boards now are actually equipping themselves with advisors as part of the board because they can then challenge and encourage the CEO to ask him or herself to understand where they are from a leadership perspective, whether they are mature in how they behave, whether they are self-aware, and whether they can command themselves in a very different fashion with their team to ensure that folks are following them down a path to a $1 billion valuation, as opposed to being told what to do and being challenged to work 80 to 90 hours a week without any reward or compensation. It's also important to reflect upon the fact that employees have a different set of expectations for their leaders and certainly for their CEOs. They do anticipate and they expect that they'll behave in a very objective, a very open fashion, as opposed to lending their insecurities to trying to navigate and guide an organization down a path to what they think is success. So again, if you are a leader of an organization, understand that your employees have a very different set of expectations for you. And of course, if you're an employee, maintain those high levels of expectation and those high levels of anticipation for your leader, because you need to challenge them to be the best that they can be and challenge them in many ways to be able to access the assets that they have at their disposal so they can be constantly improving and challenging themselves to be a great leader. I'm Gregory Wade, you're watching The Defender, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, comment, and share below.